In 1994, the U.S. World Cup helped launch Major League Soccer just 2 years later in 1996, and it became the most successful domestic league in U.S. history. Now, Major League Soccer is on a 2-month break for the 2026 World Cup, but they will be very active this summer. And the question is, what exactly will they do? Sure, they will sign a lot of big players, but what else do they have in store? I brought on Alexi Lalas to talk about what the difference is between Major League Soccer in 2026 versus 1994, the last time the World Cup was in the United States, and how this World Cup could help Major League Soccer going forward, just like the last one. Hey guys, also real quick, if you haven't hit the like button down below, make sure you do. It helps us out quite a bit. So make sure you guys give us a thumbs up and also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. 70% of our viewers are not subscribed. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button and little bell notification so you never miss any of our videos. All right. We have our friend Alexi Lalas back, but today, we talked about USMNT. We're going to talk about Major League Soccer because this is also very important for the league. This is a huge opportunity in their backyard to present the sport to a whole new generation of fans and hopefully capture their eye to supporting the domestic league. Alexi, is this the most important year in MLS history?
I think it's a most important year. I don't know if it's the most important year, but I do think that, we've talked now for I don't know how many years about the ramp leading up to the summer of 26 and how to, hopefully harness and use the World Cup from an MLS perspective. And look, the reality is that there's a lot of people that are going to come into the soccer tent this summer, and the soccer tent's, the World Cup tent, but they're going to be exposed to soccer. And, the theory goes, hey, give them a taste. And who knows, they might want more of it when the World Cup and the circus leaves town. And MLS is right there. Not all of them, but a certain portion. And that will grow, that will grow the game. And that's what MLS wants to do. So you got to be prepared. All right. There's no excuse for MLS not maximizing this summer. Obviously playing up the MLS players that are involved in the World Cup this summer, making sure that MLS is part of, the marketing and the conversation and what people are highlighting, because there's a lot of people that are going to be introduced to American soccer culture. And what is it? Well, MLS is a huge part of that. And so, I hope that MLS has their ducks in the row. Obviously, there's going to be a hiatus when it comes to the actual game, which is good, but it also gives you this kind of window from an individual team perspective and collectively from a league perspective to try to do things that are going to raise awareness because people are into soccer of what Major League Soccer is, because there's a lot of people that still don't necessarily follow it or don't necessarily know a whole lot about it.
So, it's easy to say, obviously, that you probably wouldn't have expected what it is now 32 years ago, right? Because you probably didn't really know what to expect. And we know the World Cup in 94 kind of kickstarted MLS 2 years later, 96, and the league's been around. I think this is 31st season technically, even though that was 30 years ago. But are you content with where the league is? I'm not going to say, did you know it was going to be here or be what it is now, but are you content now seeing what it is 30 years later?
Yeah. So there's a part of me that is not content. I'll get to that in a second, because I do think there has to be some real talk, if you will, about what MLS is. And I know MLS takes plenty of slings and arrows, some of them completely fairly. But if you look at what MLS has become, like we said, over the last 30 years, it's unprecedented in terms of how quickly it has grown, how big it has become, how successful it has been, especially when you put it up against any other country or league out there. Now, could it be better? Oh, yeah, it definitely could. And if you had asked me back in 1996 when we first kicked off, we didn't even know it was going to last a couple of years. As you know, our history is littered with leagues and teams that have folded. Okay, so we didn't know it was going to last, not just our career, but now 30 years on. And that's an incredible feat. Ultimately, it is the most successful North American soccer league in history. You put it up against anybody there. It still has a long way to go, but again, like in American soccer, we've talked about this before. We love to kick ourselves for what we aren't. Well, you know what? You also have to celebrate what MLS has become. Now, the other side of it is where I want more. I'm greedy, and I am honest about it in that I want to be the best league in the world. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it could happen, specifically and uniquely because it's in the United States and Canada. Players want to come to North America. This is not China. This is not Saudi Arabia. This is America. And players and their families want to come. You have to give them a reason to come. It's not for lack of money. You look at the ownership group of MLS, it's amazing in terms of the billionaires that exist. I've told you this before. My dream is that Don Garber steps on a stage with all 30 owners and they announce the moonshot to be the best league in the world. And yeah, it's going to cost money. And yeah, you're going to have to do some things differently. But I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe that they could do it. If they really put their minds to it and said, no, we're not going to let other leagues, be better than us, even if it's just perceived as better than us. We're going to do everything from an American perspective to make this the best league in the world with the best players, all the prestige, all the attention. Because I'm telling you right now, the EPL didn't happen because of weather and food. That's not why people went to England, okay? But they want to go to the U.S. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but, I'm never satisfied.
I think one of the reasons my listeners respect me so much is because I'm willing to call out the flaws of the league, right? And I'm not always negative. Some people think I am, but I think that might be just because certain people are always so positive that any type of pushback seems too much, right? I think one thing that bothers me a bit, and I've thought about this for several months now, even years, is I feel like this golden opportunity that we talked about of this World Cup being played in your backyard is being squandered by Major League Soccer. And like you said, if you were going to take your moonshot, stars align, do everything possible, this was the time to do it. Relax the roster restrictions, sign as many key players as you could right after the World Cup, maybe go big for some huge names, which we'll talk about later because I do think they will, but to a more aggressive standpoint, like sign as many as you possibly can. And it still feels like Major League Soccer is afraid of their own shadow. And they have this PTSD of, well, listen, we can't go too crazy because, we could lose all of our money. The league could fold still, which I think we're past that point. I don't think that's going to happen now. I think we're pretty much, I don't want to say we're not capable of dissolving. Anything could happen, but I think that it's very, very far-fetched at this point.
No, we're well beyond that. So I mean, the worry about the league going away, it's not going to go away. It's just, to your point, how do you make it better? For example, I think they missed an opportunity to start this fall in terms of the change of calendar. Okay.
Yes.
And I'm sure if Don Garber and the leadership over was here with us, they would say yes, but this, and I'm sure they have convincing arguments. But it just would have been, to your point, you could just be hammering home, hey, MLS 2.0, 3.0, whatever you are, but the new MLS, whatever it is, it's kicking off this fall, and we're not messing around. Now, it would have meant that you would have had to play this mini season here in the spring of 2026, but at some point you're going to have to do it, and it's just, again, we waited 2 years. It was the smart thing to do back in 1996. We waited 2 years because it was supposed to start after 94, but we waited 2 years to do it. I just think that, to your point, we knew the World Cup was coming. The ramp was there. And I just don't want the circus to leave town and all of that momentum and all of that attention to go away and not to harness that in the best possible way from an MLS perspective.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I want to talk more about like the investment part, but let's talk about the calendar thing because you brought it up, right? So you just mentioned that they were going to have to play this, what do they call it? What's the word they use? Season, like the shotgun season, whatever they want to call it,
or whatever.
Sprint season, whatever, sprint season, right? But you could argue that's what they did this year because they're taking 2 months off. They played 15 games and they're taking 2 months off. They literally could have done that this year. Yep. No other soccer league is taking 2 months off during the World Cup because their off season is happening, right? No other league that I know of is taking 2 months off. So this would have been a perfect opportunity to enact that. And to your point, say, hey guys, same MLS, new calendar, right? Like we're coming back. It's going to be following the European calendar now. The branding, the marketing would have been incredible. And it just feels like, and I tweeted about this the other day, MLS feels like they're always a day late and a dollar short.
Yeah, it's there are platforms. I mean, look, the world's attention is going to be on us here for the 6 weeks of the World Cup. Every soccer personality, writer, or influencer out there is going to be focused in on what's happening. It's the perfect opportunity to talk about what you are doing, whether you want to make announcements or continue with announcements or clarify stuff, point to what's happening, remind people about what's happening. And so, yeah, it is a little disappointing, like I said, and I'm not, in the meetings, because I'm sure there's smart people and that's what they wanted to do. And again, it's not our money, so we can tell them we are very, very good at telling other people how to spend their money and how to do their jobs. But it comes with the territory. They can handle it. They've been around. But to your point, what is the big MLS announcements or big MLS news that is going to come out? Maybe it's signings. That certainly could be something that could happen. But we'll see. I just hope they don't. To your point, they don't waste this opportunity in this platform, and it's just right back to where we were. And again, it was like, hey, remember that World Cup that was happening? Yeah, okay, we're just back to normal way of acting. No matter what, there should be a fundamental change and a recognition that there is going to be a fundamental change. It was before the World Cup in 2026, and then there was MLS after the World Cup in 2026. And they took it to a whole nother level, and they used the World Cup to propel it to that level.
The two most disappointing things about this, right, and when I'm thinking about it, is that they had a decade almost to prepare. 2018 is when it's announced, 8 years later. But the most important thing, Alexi, is that you signed Lionel Messi, not 2 years, not 1 year before the World Cup, 3 years. You had him in your league for 3 years to kind of catapult your brand, your other teams maybe getting into the pile and signing big name players or changing things. Like this felt like it was the time to capitalize and then kind of run it through until the World Cup. And if I had told you, and I know I said this to you in the last episode, because I like to play these scenarios out. If I tell you certain things in the past, how you would interpret them and what you would think. And if I told you that the World Cup, and if I told you in 2016, right? If I said, hey, Alexi, the MLS is going to have Lionel Messi in their league in 2023. He's still going to be very good. He's coming off of a World Cup win 6 months earlier. You'd be like, whoa, that's crazy. He's coming to MLS after winning a World Cup 6 months prior. And also the World Cup is going to be the United States. You would be saying, holy shit, like this is the golden goose. This is incredible. I can't even fathom what MLS is going to do.
Right. And again, you talk about this ramp and it's like, yeah, we'll get there. And we got lots of time. Well, that time, it goes by very, very quick. And then you're left trying to catch up and trying to do some different things. So yeah, I don't know, when all is said and done after this summer, is MLS in a better position? If MLS, and not MLS, but if us from on the outside, if we can't look and say, yeah, MLS is in a better position, directly and maybe indirectly, there might be a combination of both things, then we will have failed. And MLS will have failed to use this to their advantage. And, we've talked about it before. Who knows when it's coming back again? So you're only going to get one shot at this. And you best not miss, because you're never going to get a better opportunity to, have people in that tent and to, spread that gospel. And in this case, we're talking about the gospel of MLS. And you have them enthralled and they can't go anywhere. And so you should be using it to educate people, to excite people about what you're doing. And again, to separate and make it distinct from what came before. Ideally, there would have been a pre-26 MLS and a post-26 MLS. And that's where things changed. And many, many years from now, you'd be able to look back in the same way that we look back about when Messi came, when David Beckham and the designated player came, these types of moments, these flagpole types of moments that fundamentally changed the league. I want to be able to look back at 26 and say, that's when MLS put another flagpole down and they were never the same. and they shot forward and used the World Cup to do things.
I think when I look back on it too, I remember there was like talks in 2014 or 2015 after the World Cup, because that's when the CBA had ended, what they were going to change, and they were talking about adding another DP, and they later added like TAM, which helped improve the middle of the roster. I just don't think as a fan, and I don't support any team league. I just cover the league, but I'm a fan of the league. I want the league to do well, as you do too. I just don't think I would have ever pictured a world like 12 years later where they wouldn't have added, another DP, couple DPs, just, and I understand U22s, whatever, but this is like the slot that lets you sign anyone, any caliber player, no restrictions. Like you can go sign whatever transfer fee. I just can't believe that is kind of where they're still at 12 years later, or honestly 15 years later, because the third DP was announced in 2011. I think Robbie Keane was like one of the first. Maybe it was, no, there was a player that they had, actually, they traded to Chivas USA to be able to sign Robbie Keane. But either way, it's been around for 15 years and it's still the same. That is shocking.
Yeah. I mean, again, you would love them to get on stage during the World Cup and say, hey, this is, we're adding however many DP spots, or it's whatever. It's a free for all. You can spend as much money. Now, I know they're not going to do that. And there's a reason why MLS has been around 30 years, and they would all point to the structure of the league. And so, maybe you don't let it go completely crazy, but you do, loosen the strings, if you will, and give the owners, and there are owners out there that want to spend money, give them the mechanisms to be able to do that. And in doing so, to improve their product for their customer, by the way. I mean, we still have, NYCFC with a wonderful new stadium that's going to come online, Chicago with another stadium that's going to come online, all of these wonderful venues and everything like that. Well, these venues are wonderful, but they're just boxes for the product. And if the product isn't good, or it can be better, then let's make it better. And even if it's better, even in the way it is perceived, that's as valuable as anything. Because we all know that there's plenty of crap soccer that's played all over the world, even over in, the mighty EPL, plenty of crap soccer. But the perception is that it's a higher level. And in many cases, you could actually make that argument, and it is. That's fine. So, MLS, again, it's La Cosa Nostra, warts and all. It's our thing. We are close to it. We protect it at times. But I think if we are honest, we recognize that it's far from perfect. It can get better, but it certainly has come a long way since 1996.
Okay, so you just mentioned a second ago about ambitious owners. There's definitely owners who would be willing to spend to levels of other teams around the world, right? If they were allowed to. If Commissioner Lalas just scrapped all the restrictions, right? Mm-hmm. And Inter Miami is a team, obviously, they've shown that they're willing to spend. Jorge Mas is a very committed owner. Right. What do you realistically think their potential as a club in the world? I'm talking like rating clubs by quality. What do you think they realistically could be if there were no mechanisms in their way?
Oh, I think they could, field an all-star. Again, it goes back to people want to live in the United States. Players, if they can live in the United States and they can make a bunch of money, their family's happy, they're safe. There's obviously education and medical, the list goes on and on and on about the wonderful things about the United States. And they don't lose, if they're international players, they don't lose the credibility and the cachet. Now you're sitting pretty. And so I think that can happen. The migration that we saw to England, again, that migration can happen tenfold when it comes to North America, and particularly to the United States when it comes to players. But you got to pay them. And again, you have to have the quality, or at least the perception of quality, so that they're not losing their spots in the international game for their national team. That's important. Look, I at times have argued for not just the single entity, but what parity in American sports and in MLS has brought us. And I do see a value to the fact that when MLS fans get up on that first morning of the season, unlike most places, there is the chance that you are going to win and win the title. And I think there is a value to that, but I've also changed over the years where I don't want to hold people back, because I want to see what it looks like when a lot of these owners are left to their own devices and are enabled to be able to spend the money that they want. I'm less, and the reason why I want to see that is because I'm less worried about the ones that don't want to spend, that they will be left behind. Yes, there will be pressure for them to keep up with the Joneses, which is always one of the arguments about, letting the horses loose. But, I mean, I don't know, a team like in a smaller market, like, I don't know, Minnesota or something like that, the fan base is going to love their team. And they will very quickly recognize that, if their team wasn't spending, I'm not saying that Minnesota wouldn't spend big, but let's just say they didn't spend big. They're still going to love their team, and they're going to factor in the fact that others are spending so much more. And so those wins and those great moments are going to be that much more valuable. Now, they will get up at the beginning of the season if that happens, with the recognition and the knowledge that they don't necessarily have a chance to win the title that year just because of the disparity. But I'm ready to kind of see what that world looks like and what that MLS looks like.
So I want to talk to you about like the summer plan, because I do think some big names are going to come, and I want to ask you about that. But this is something I've never asked you before. You were with the LA Galaxy when David Beckham signed in 2007. You were the general manager and president of the team. And you just said all these things about like the lifestyle and stuff. What was the process? Because I know Tim Lewicki was also very crucial in getting him too. But like, you were there. What was the process of convincing him to leave Madrid at 31, 32 years old? Like, what did that? And it was a different time. It was a different league. It's nowhere near what it is now. What was the process of convincing him that he should make that move to Major League Soccer and MLS?
Well, we paid him a boatload of money, so that easy,
helps. That
right?
helps, yeah.
And I'm not being flip about it. The reality is, we paid him a tremendous amount of money, and we promised him and gave him a country and culture that he and his family wanted to live in, and from a business perspective, a market that would be opened up to him and his brand that they could monetize. And so, I mean, I think it wasn't a no-brainer, but I think maybe a little, I think you can make an argument that it was a no-brainer, and he was in the right position at that time to make the move, playing wise, in that he wanted something different. He had done what he had done at Real Madrid, obviously had done what he had done at Manchester United, and he kind of wanted something different. And I got to give him credit, because it's not a leap of faith, but it is, back then, it was definitely different. And it was wild. It was even for a team like the Galaxy, which was kind of an elite team, even for us, bringing David Beckham in, because you're not just bringing David Beckham in, you're bringing the machine of David Beckham. Not only, one of the great players in the world at the time, but one of the most famous people in the world at that time. And that is a hurricane that comes into your organization. And it was not easy to deal with. And there were plenty of, collateral damage, including myself. A couple of years later, I got fired. The business off the field, we were really good at that, but the product that we were putting on the field was not good enough yet. Now, over the years, and Bruce came in, and that's where it really started cooking. But it was another one of those moments, and a seminal moment in the progress and in the growth of Major League Soccer. But it was wild from a PR perspective, and from a marketing perspective, and the business, and he and his machine impacted everything that we did with the Galaxy, and you couldn't have been prepared for it. So we had to muddle through it and figure it out as best that we could. We were better prepared than others, but it was still unlike anything that we had ever experienced or seen.
How long did that recruitment process, how long did it start? Like, how was it? Years? Was it like a couple months?
Yeah. You mentioned Tim Lewicki, he was planting the seeds, and we had the David Beckham Academy through AEG. And so we already had a working relationship with him. And, we had to create the designated player mechanism just to actually do this. And Sean Hunter, who was Tim Lewicki's, second in command, was really responsible for creating and carving that out for MLS to be able to do that. And so there were a lot of moving parts. And then, like we said, we paid him a tremendous amount of money. We rebranded mid-season to coincide with his arrival. So it was, so dealing with Adidas, and literally changing everything about the aesthetic and the way that we looked. And it was fun. I don't regret it for a second. I learned a tremendous amount. We made plenty of mistakes along the way, but it was a wild ride.
Was that and I find this fascinating. I think a lot of people probably listening do too. Like was that deal ever in jeopardy? And if it had been in jeopardy, I'm sure because of how you guys are on the brand, there was probably a backup plan because you obviously were shooting for the stars. But was that deal ever in jeopardy when you? I mean, because it's tough to get across the line.
Yeah, it's tough to get across the line. I mean, I remember going with, then our coach was Frank Yallop at the time. I remember going to Spain and meeting with David and talking about different things. And um, I mean, it could have blown up, but I think you put out initial feelers, right? And you start to get some positive feedback from his representation and everything. Like, hey, this could work. You got to get creative in terms of the contract, and we certainly did. I mean, not the least of which is the ability to buy an MLS club, which is now what we've just been talking about down in Miami. And he was incredibly smart, and his people were incredibly smart to put that in. I always say, if I had to ever do it over again, back in '96 when I came back to MLS, I would have had a Beckham clause to be able to buy a team. It would have been good business. But he was very smart in recognizing and looking around the corner, and it's worked out great. And not just from a business perspective, it's wonderful to have Inter Miami, and that signing of David Beckham begets the Inter Miami situation. And so it was, it's cool that that's how it worked out. But again, that was a hell of a clause to have in a contract, and it made it that much more enticing for him to make this major move and this kind of internationally big move for him and for his brand.
Well, that's a perfect lead up to like this next part, right? About the signings of the summer, what's going to happen. I think they're going to have a pretty active summer. They're going to sign a lot of big names, MLS are. Now, look, I don't know if that's going to make the league any better. It's going to make it more appealing. It's going to get more eyes on it. That's fine. But obviously, I care more about the overall quality of the league more than who's playing in it. We need multiple of these guys. I think they're going to have a big summer. I'll just name some of the guys I think they're going to sign. And I'm curious if I'm sure you could see it happening, but realistically, I think Mo Salah is going to come to Major League Soccer. I think his family would enjoy the United States more. I think San Diego has an Egyptian owner. Sure. I think they're going to try to make that work and maybe give him something like a Messi deal. I don't know if it's going to be exactly because that's kind of a rare situation, but I think they're going to give him a lucrative deal. And I personally believe he would prefer to live in the United States rather than Saudi Arabia, which would be the other country that would probably offer him a boatload of money. So that's the first guy. I think that Christian Pulisic is going to come to Major League Soccer. I think he's having a pretty poor season, at least halfway, the second half at AC Milan. I think they've said that they want to get rid of him. I don't think Christian Pulisic is the kind of guy, personally, this is my opinion, I don't think he wants to play for a mid-table, low-table, big five team, or big five league team. I think he wants to play at a big team, or he would happily come back to the United States and make a boatload of money off the World Cup. Like you said, endorsement deals, all the things that can happen. I think that he would probably be very intrigued to do that. And another one that I could see possibly coming to Major League Soccer, probably very likely, and I'm just giving three names, like Robert Lewandowski. I think he's very likely to come here. And I think Griezmann's already signed with Orlando. So they're going to have a bunch of these guys come to Major League Soccer in the summer, but do you think it really matters? And do you honestly think these guys are likely to come?
Oh, I think it matters. I think that would be a wonderful moment for MLS to capitalize on what people just saw and some of the players that people just saw, to be able to say, hey, and you can see them every single week, in wherever they're going to play. By the way, in '96 when MLS kicked off, it was with the signings of a lot of players from 1994, myself and obviously all the U.S. players that came back. But then you had your Carlos Valderrama and Donadoni and, just people from Aline Suter and people that you had seen play in the World Cup were now playing in MLS. And there was an appeal because it brings credibility, sells tickets. Even today, I know we've gone through the big name type of stuff, and some sell more than others. Obviously, there's only one Messi, there's only one Beckham. Robert Lewandowski, I think he would sell tickets, not at the level of a Messi or anything like that. The Pulisic one's interesting because I mean, I'm not sure, no matter what, that he's going to have a place to go to come this fall when it comes to AC Milan. So they might be looking to make some major changes, even with Pochettino as coach. Who knows? But people sometimes forget that Christian Pulisic grew up in the U.S. with all of his international adventures. He grew up in the U.S., played with a bunch of the guys on the U.S. national team at the youth level, and I think, I think would enjoy a return home. It's just a matter of, is he ready for that? I'm sure he's made plenty of money. He's done some wonderful things, and where does he fit in? And that would be certainly a feather in the cap of MLS to be able to do that. But you kind of have to sign a stable of these guys. And unlike in '96, when we waited 2 years after '94, this one would be, hey, we're off to the races. These are the players that we signed in the summer window, and they're ready to go when MLS kicks back into gear later on this year.
So of all those names, and I just gave you three, right? What would you personally, likelihood of those three in order of likelihood of signing in MLS this summer? Pulisic, Salah, Lewandowski.
Lewandowski, Pulisic, Salah. I think that's my power.
So Salah would be the least likely out of those three.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you when it comes to San Diego. It seems like a logical thing given the Egyptian connection.
You're not saying it wouldn't happen. You're just saying it's out of the three, it's the least likely.
Out of the three in terms of likeliness. And I'm sure there's other ones. And, they won't all be huge names, but that's okay. And who knows, there might be some players that, use the summer platform to raise their value that aren't going to necessarily go to, Chelsea's and stuff like that. We've seen, plenty of players when it comes to CONCACAF teams that have had good World Cups and they increase their value. And the next thing you know, they're running around on MLS fields. So yeah, there will be, I think, to your point, big names, but even some names that we don't necessarily know or that we discover this summer through the World Cup.
Okay. So let me ask you this too, when it comes to, like a Pulisic, right? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, we talked about his form, and he's not very popular in Milan right now.
Yeah,
but I think Major League Soccer has this idea of like being more popular than quality right now. They don't want to be bad, but they want to obviously get viewership. That's the most important thing. That's what drives the numbers up. That's what makes the money. Getting people. I was getting killed on Twitter for saying I think he'll come back this summer, but I've always thought that this was MLS's goal. They want the biggest player, popularity-wise, last 10, 15 years for the USMNT to come home after the World Cup. He's 28 years old. He's not past his prime. Obviously, I think you could argue he's still in his prime. I mean, why do people think that's far-fetched?
Oh, I don't think that's far-fetched. I think that they feel that is settling, that they feel that he is letting himself down by doing that. So I think their reaction isn't that they don't think it would happen. It's that they're scared it's going to happen because of what it means. And, I mean, look, Christian Pulisic, I think, is well on his way to becoming the best male American soccer player in history. Now, if he were to come back to MLS here, I think a lot of people, because of their anti-MLS, bias, are going to say, well, out of sight, out of mind, he's no longer, I'm done with him. Okay, fine, whatever. If you want to do that, he's already done more than 99.9% of the men's players that have ever played, and he's still, like you said, in his prime age. We saw when Josie came back and Jermaine Jones came back and Michael Bradley came back and Clint Dempsey came back. It was these were big signings, and it was kind of an aspirational thing for the league. Now, their national team coaches weren't necessarily happy about it, but I mean, I can't believe we're saying this 30 years later. I knew when I came back from Serie A, and that was a different time. That was a different Serie A back then, when I came back in 96. I knew that I wanted to, but it was a responsibility. If the league was going to be successful, we needed to have players come back to the proverbial league of their own and to populate it. If MLS ever wants to get to a point where people don't look down on it, more and more players and better players need to choose it. Don Garber, the commissioner of MLS, always talks about having MLS be a league of choice. Well, the way that you make it a league of choice is by more and more players making that choice. Now, sometimes you entice them with money, sometimes you entice them with lifestyle, but you got to entice them. And the more and more you entice, the easier it gets for players around the world, whether they're American players or other players, to say, yeah, that's my league of choice. That's where I want to go. And, that's what has, for the last 30 years, been the challenge.
I'm very curious to see, because it's going to inevitably happen. I'm curious to see who's going to be the first player that comes, and I'm not even talking about America, I'm just talking about just world talent. It comes to Major League Soccer at 27, 28 years old, who's still in their prime, very desirable, hot commodity. Any team in the world would want them. There's going to be a player that shocks the world and comes to MLS at that age. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And I'm just curious. I just wonder who's going to be the first, because, we've obviously had all these other big signings and they still blow us away. Like Messi coming, I always thought he probably would, but when he finally does it, even he's 35 years old when he came, it's still exciting and a great moment. When that first player comes, Alexi, at 27, 28, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the prime, but again, it goes back to, until they look at it as not a stepping stone to something better, until they look at it as, I am not going to hurt my chances with the national team, and until they look at it as, this is where I want to go, not where I kind of have to go to get where I want to go. That's the trick for Major League Soccer. And we've seen it, in different ways and in different times. But, I'm trying to think of, who that would be this summer. And you'd have to spend money. And so it goes back to kind of what we were talking about, of you have to have the mechanism to be able to do it. And it drives me crazy when I see the ambition that some of these owners have, and they're not able to act on that ambition. And I understand it is a single entity, and therefore the collective is the most important. But, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face at times. And I wonder what MLS could be and what it would look like if, some of those restrictions were taken away, or at the very least loosened going forward. And I'm here to see it, and I'm interested. I'm not saying it would necessarily be great or successful, but we've tried it the other way for so long. And yes, we've come a long way, but let's do something big. Let's do something bold. Let's do something, like I said, that's a moonshot that people say can't be done. And let's see where the chips fall.
Well, the player that I came to the top of my mind now, obviously he's kind of in hot water and being questioned as a good teammate, but could you imagine if Mbappe had came to MLS this summer? Now, that wouldn't happen, but I mean, what if he left Madrid and came at 27 years old? They spent, the league collectively, single entity, spent $100 million transfer fee on him. I don't know who would get him, right? They'd have to do they'd have to work that out, or probably let him pick where he wants to go. But wouldn't that set the league on fire to sign a player of his caliber in MLS? Yeah. I mean, that would be crazy.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what he looked like. Playing in. Can he do it on a Tuesday night in Columbus?
Exactly. No, or a game in. Because they're gonna play games in February. What about a February game in Colorado?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to happen. We'll see. I'm excited to see. I'm a little cautious, but I am excited to see what they do, because I do think MLS, now it's not the plan I would have, not the plan you would have, but I do think there's a plan, and I'm curious to see what they do to execute it. So we'll see. Alexi, I appreciate it, my friend. Well, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Guys, make sure you go check him on his State of the Union podcast. He's going to be on Fox this entire summer covering the World Cup. He's going to be there with Zlatan Ibrahimovic and many, many others. I say Zlatan because everyone in MLS loves him, even if his ego is through the roof, right? Welcome to Zlatan.
Yeah, he's a good guy. It's going to be fun to see him on television. Thierry Henry and, the whole gang, Clint Dempsey and Landon Donovan and Kobe and Stu and all the guys and the girls. And, we're gonna give you a steady diet throughout the World Cup of everything that's going on. But just for reiterate, how much respect I have for everything that you're doing. You're doing wonderful things when it comes to soccer and, flying the MLS flag. And as we said before, it's okay to be, to have criticism, hopefully that it's done in a respectful way. And in doing so, because, you want the best for what this sport is and what this league is moving forward. And that comes out in the way that you talk. And that's why, people come on your show, and that's why people watch your show, and that's why people listen to your show, because you're interesting, you're informative, and that's why I come on the show. So thank you for having me yet again.
I appreciate the kind words, my friend, and I'm proud to call you a friend. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and I'm glad to take the time to do this with me. Let's enjoy the summer. Let's see what happens. We'll talk soon afterwards. Guys, if you made it to the end, make sure you give us a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.